Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. Joining me today is Helene Stanway from AXAXL, Nigel Walsh from Deloitte and of course Tim Hardcastle from Instanda, because today we are going to be talking all about what the future of insurance innovation looks like. So without further ado, I want to get you guys to actually introduce yourselves, tell us a bit about your role. So first up, Helene, could you give us a bit of an introduction to your role at AXAXL, please?
Yeah, certainly. So I love what I do. Let me just say that. I run the digital team at AXAXL, and that is the team that gets to play with all of the new technologies. That having been said, I'm very passionate about making sure that those technologies solve problems. So we've got a very, very close connection with the technology, the business, the strategy to make sure that they all align and we're actually delivering something that is useful and most importantly gets adopted. And the things that we focus on are Internet of Things, ecosystems, artificial intelligence, those sorts of things.
That's absolutely brilliant. It sounds super exciting. And Nigel, could you also give us a bit of background to your role as well, please?
Yeah, sure. And hey folks, Nigel Walsh, partner at Deloitte. Like Helene, I'm very fortunate. I actually don't go to work, and I'm sure many of my colleagues will probably tell you, and Tim will jump in with a snarky comment, I'm sure, but I actually thoroughly enjoy helping organizations to get the most out of new technologies, like Helene, not for technology's sake, but to solve real business problems. So I co-lead the global insurtech space for Deloitte. I lead a number of the strategic alliances that we have and broadly help customers work out how they get the most from net new technologies in traditionally what we see as legacy estates to go drive good things for clients.
Absolutely brilliant. Last but not least, Tim, could you give us a bit of background to your role at Instanda, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. And Nigel gave me a great segue, so and Helene did as well. So I'm co-founder and CEO of Instanda, which is a technology that has been purposely built and designed to help organisations like AXA and many of the other organisations that Nigel work with to accelerate their digitalization plans. And we're really, really fortunate. And I'll echo Helene and Nigel's sentiment. I'm so blessed to be working with some of the most progressive companies in the world across 13 countries. We have over 60 clients now, and they're all in their own way at various stages trying to make many improvements for their own customers in terms of providing them with a better experience and a personalized offering. And that's what our technology allows them to do very well.
That's absolutely brilliant. And can I just say, it's really interesting to hear this perspective of being able to play in this innovative area, but not just doing it for the sake of innovation for innovation's sake. So, as I kicked things off, I said, we're going to be looking at the future of innovation in insurance. But I think one way to be, to really look at the scope of things and how things have changed is to look at it before COVID-19, obviously the elephant in the room. Tim, could I get your perspective? How would you categorize the insurance industry and its ability to onboard digital technologies pre-COVID-19 compared to other verticals in finance?
So I think I'm fortunate in that I worked in insurance as a technology leader, some years ago now, and have started the company Instanda, attempted to collaborate with the industry in the early years, which was challenging, and then bridge this gap between where we are now and the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I think that period of time, the last 3, 4, 5 years, has been very, very pivotal in terms of the appetite, the readiness, the preparedness of companies to embrace and work with new technologies like ourselves and many, many others. And you've seen the increase in AI and chatbots, in robotics, increased use of analytics. So I think if I took the COVID part out of the equation for the minute, and just said over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I think there's been an increasing velocity and trend towards using technology, embracing it and delivering value to insurance customers. I think when you slot the COVID element back into that picture, I think what I would call out has been a dramatic acceleration in the last 6 months around just the simple use of technology. Every chief executive of every single insurance company around the world has had to get used to leading her or his teams remotely, virtually. And I know you might think that's a very basic thing, but I think this very, very fast, in-the-face presentation of how technology makes a difference has been a real wake-up call, because many insurance companies have had to implement their business continuity plans, let alone think about their customers. So I think for me, it's supercharging this trend already, this direction towards increasing digitalization. And we're super excited to be part of that, and we've seen a real pickup in our client interest in the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting to think, obviously the scale as well we're talking about when it comes to insurers. I mean, being able to have to look after your customers, but also your employees at that scale. I mean, Helene, can you tell us a bit more about, when it comes to the innovation side of things, did it feel like you were being put on a back burner, or suddenly, you're getting the calls every day about how can we innovate our own back-end systems to really kind of compete with this new change in technology and culture?
Yeah, I mean, let me link to something Tim just said. I think what the COVID sort of pandemic has done is made people realise that the barriers that they thought were there are not. And actually they can overcome them and still do everything that they need to do. And it's just about adaptation. But in terms of kind of, the AXAXL perspective, we haven't missed a beat in terms of innovating, launching things to market, working on innovation. It's all still gone ahead. And we've had some really proud moments over the last few months. We launched something that we've been working on for sort of 12, 18 months back in May, which was our construction ecosystem. And we've continued to launch things, even up a couple of weeks ago when we launched the digital risk engineer at AMIC. So we've adapted, we're moving forward, and we're still able to connect with our clients, despite the fact that we're not seeing each other face to face.
That's absolutely brilliant. And I guess, we've obviously discussed how much a massive change COVID-19 has been, but maybe would it be fair, Nigel, to categorize the insurance and innovation insurance industry as there was an element of being able to just accept digital transformation as being just mediocre. It was something that just needed to happen in incremental, just enough to appease some clients and help the kind of digital transformation in the back end. Would you categorize the insurance industry as just offering mediocre digital transformation?
I think you've got to put it into context. We're not talking about a transactional system here that we engage on a daily basis, whether it's Spotify, Amazon, your retail stores or whatever else. It's something that you engage with on acquisition and hopefully never really on claim. So you're asking us to innovate or change a process that people don't necessarily want to engage with on an ongoing basis. Therefore, it's not normally front of mind to get absolutely spot on at the outset. That said, to Helene and Tim's point, I think this has been a good accelerant for the industry, as in, dare I say, the old saying, necessity is the mother of all innovation. We didn't have a choice. We had to get here or die. We were never going to die because we are an inherent part of society and needed for the wheels to keep turning. But I guess my challenge would be, how could we have done better? And importantly, how do we not go backwards from this point to go, that's the way we've always done it? How do we now leapfrog forward and go, we've proved to you we can get to this point. What are the things that we can do to reimagine what we had in the first place as opposed to just digitize it? And that's always been one of my worries, is how do we not just take the old process, make it a bit quicker, faster, smarter, and that be seen as good enough, which is a lot of what we see in financial services more broadly, but especially in insurance.
I can imagine. Well, Helene, you actually touched on a few things. I don't want to make this too much of a kind of sad chat just about COVID. Can you give me some examples? As I said, you mentioned a couple before, but some examples of where you've seen brilliant advancements in insurance innovation.
There have been many, actually. The Brit Syndicate Key was phenomenal. Really something that needs to be taken forward and more broadly as an industry perspective. The Chubb Digital Studio, in order to be able to connect better with Chubb, was a great one. And of course our own are really, really important. But there have been many, and they're not just small things. So I really like Nigel's point there around those 2 or 3 things are not just covering over what we've just done before, but a little bit better and a bit more polished. These are step change, transformational innovations that are helping lead the market. And I think on the sort of the other side of the coin, we need to think also about our people. And whilst increment is still moving forward, sometimes actually that is a good thing, because it's meaning people are learning and then being more prepared to then take a bigger leap.
Become exponentially bigger.
Yeah. And as an industry, I just think we forget that actually all of this is about augmenting the human and the human has to adapt and learn and reskill and upskill and all the rest of it alongside the new technology.
Even on that, Helene, sorry, Doug, even on that though, Helene, you've got the brilliant key piece where it's automated follow syndicate. There's no humans involved in theory. So actually there's no augmentation to do. It's actually, there's a process that used to take place that no longer needs to take place.
Yeah, I totally agree. But you then have to at least have somebody who understands what the algorithm is saying. So there's the development of it, which is a skill, and then there's the understanding of it, which is another skill. So I totally get you in this instance. It is taking the humans out, but then it's adding humans back in a different way.
Yeah, focusing on the things that matter, right? Where we have technology that can't replace this person's job or person's previous role, and have them do the things that really matter, where you need empathy and everything else.
Yeah, spot on.
Exciting. And Tim, do you agree? Have you seen this kind of shift in the human element, but also increased innovation in the tech side of things? Have you seen anything that's caught your eye when it comes to innovation brilliance in insurance?
I think as just to build on Helen and Nigel's point, I think where I'm at, and when you see because I'm very much more immersed in the technology lens and looking out into the world, I think that the truth of the matter is the technology capabilities today are actually in excess of what the industry has got capacity and capability to handle, right? That's the truth of where we are now. And I think therefore the point that's being made around the human element, the business change, the organizational change, the cultural change, the behavioral change that's needed to grab and take full advantage of the technologies that are available, I think is the challenge the industry is grappling with. And I think, the points that were made earlier about taking smaller steps and building momentum, and also seeing some of these innovations at scale, I think that's what is exciting, is that really, again, I know we've got a slightly distorted view of the world because we only talk to those organizations that are already pioneering. So we look at it from, maybe rose-tinted spectacles, as it were. But I'm really, really excited, I think, because the technology that is available today, if I just center on that for a minute, is so ubiquitous. It's so cost effective to get hold of. Everything on the planet is going to subscription-based, pay what you consume for. It's a myriad of opportunity that is existing for the industry. And I think that's what makes it so exciting. The challenge then is pointing it, directing it, organizing it, getting the coalescence of the teams, getting them, working with the technologies in the right way to create value for the customer. And I think that's what makes it so exciting at this point. I know we've got the dampener of COVID, and the economic cost of that has been horrendous. But, as Nigel said, sometimes out of strife, great things come. And I think what I'm looking at into the future is I'm just so enthused for the industry and for the customers ultimately.
Yeah, well, speaking of the customers, when faced with this huge new technological jumps that we're seeing in the industry, Nigel, do you think customer demand in insurance is anywhere near where it should be for all this new technological innovation? I've seen numerous advances in insurance technology and innovation that I never even dreamed of, and I'm in the industry myself. Do you think customer demand is there?
Doug, I'm starting to worry that if you're actually going to join myself, Helen, and Tim dreaming about insurance, that's a bigger worry for us. But it goes back to the old comments about the iPhone, right? No one said they wanted a single device that could do phone, music, and wearable in one. And if you remember going back, was it 11 or 12 years now, when the phone just turned around, it's a music device, it's a web browser, it's a phone, and people went, oh my God, it's everything all in one. No one ever imagined that we could actually need that thing, and now we rely on it every single day. So to Tim's point about subscription, I do think there's going to be a moment where the model of insurance switches entirely into this whole subscription or recurring revenue style bundle that brings everything together and embeds it into the asset that we're trying to protect, whether it's a journey, whether it's a physical property, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's a ship, or whatever it might be. And I think when you see those things and it's embedded into that journey, we see a number of OEMs partner with insurance companies now to make sure that's a single purchase. And that changes the conversation, changes the narrative. Technology is embedded. You may not interact with it in the same way that you previously knew, but it's there by default. And that will make it a very different conversation going forward, I think.
I can completely imagine. And Helene, have you, where do you stand when it comes to that journey and that changing journey for what a customer demands? Where do you start to look at? How do you know what to offer them? That must be an incredibly hard thing to weigh up with all the new technologies that you could potentially present them with.
So I would see insurance shifting further towards greater risk management. So predict and prevent, and product sits alongside service. Because what Nigel is saying there, obviously we will shift product and we will have new products or we'll combine products, but that's still the after event piece. We've now got sensors everywhere. That's telling us something, that's giving us data, that's alerting us to your water's too high or your temperature's too hot, whatever it is. And you can then start to deal with those things before they become much, much bigger issues, which both the client and the insurer should embrace and should love. So I see that shift towards much greater risk management, partnerships, and closer proximity with the data and how do you interpret that data. That's my hope, at least, and we're starting to see that shift in the commercial space where we have for a very long time in the personal space, in telematics, in cars and so on.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I've got to ask then, Tim, if I could ask you this, how do you see this kind of marrying between the technological side and these large institutions? Because obviously, as Helen mentioned, there's huge amounts of data now. I mean, and obviously when you're combining that with huge institutions, has there been a disconnect between the innovation teams and the IT teams? How can we look to change this going forward? As we've mentioned, technology and customer demands are now exponentially increasing.
Well, there's a number of points there, and I'll try and keep it brief, but because we could talk just all this session entirely on that. But I think that there's a really simple fundamental point about I want to say it and then park and move on, but around corporate IT, and I think it's great to hear Helene talk so eloquently about what AXA is doing and what their plans are, because there is a fundamental issue in many corporate IT functions, which is there's a part of IT internally to corporates, which is keeping the lights on, running all the big systems, running all the infrastructure, keeping everything going. And I think it's tremendously difficult for any leader of keeping the lights on to actually fully engage and be a leader in innovation and bringing new technologies to bear for the organization. And that is a fundamental problem across multiple industries. I remember even talking to the CIO of B-Sky-B, as it was then, and he said his nickname at the board was the plumber, because that's all he was seen as doing, just doing and so I think there's just hold that thought. And we'll come back to, when you think about the disconnect, I think those organizations that are able to lift out away from keeping the lights on, and you're seeing an increasing trend of appointing CDOs, chief digital officers, business leaders like Helene, who are actually really representing the customer's interests and the business interests. And I think we're seeing that as a trend which is gathering momentum, which is really, really good. But I think ultimately where organizations need to be is where they don't start talking about IT and the business, right? It's just about how are the propositions that are going to be enriching, whether it's the prevention services, building the ecosystems as much as the product itself, and getting those teams to work collaboratively. Years gone by, I did some consulting work at a leading retailer. It's the UK's largest online retailer. They didn't have an IT and business divide. It was about teams that collaborated, they worked together. There was marketing, data analytics, there was proposition and development, as well as the tech people that were then bringing the cloud services together to bring this proposition and this experience to enrich that customer interaction. And I think there's some way to go yet for many of the insurance companies, because they've got so much legacy. They've got legacy systems, they've got legacy processes, they've got legacy ways of working. And I think it's great to see that AXA are, moving forward in their own way, but there's such a big job to be done. And that's why, the industry does need to need organizations like Deloitte, because they are a catalyst as well and a stimulus to helping unhook the old way and getting, a much more modern and a modern approach to be working effectively.
Speaking of that, I was just going to say, Nigel, can we get your ingredients to, how do you remedy this situation?
Oh my God, you mentioned ingredients. I can't not mention cake. I'll try and stay away from that. And actually, to Tim's point, what Tim's described to me, though, is there's a fundamental shift from those that see IT as a service provider, as opposed to those that see technology as a business partner to getting customer outcome. And where you have those two side by side in the same tribe or squad or team or whatever you want to call it, you get much better outcome. The other thing I would say is we've seen an inordinate number of people just go, we can't transform 300 years of legacy at this speed at the right price point. Let's just build new on the edge or build new from the inside and work our way out. And that's where we see new platforms like Instanda and a bunch of other new technologies come together to reorchestrate and solve those problems, but almost create from scratch, create the new opportunities from scratch, as opposed to let's spend lots of money transforming the legacy estate. You can migrate later if you want to. One of the beauties about insurance in my mind, and specifically the subscription market, is you can migrate on a monthly or annual basis and be off of the old platform, at least in the general insurance space or P&C, in no time at all. And that gives you a really, really unique opportunity to actually refresh the estate when you need to.
Excellent. And I mean, going back a bit, we've talked about trying to get that ingredients in terms of trying to solve that issue of legacy and the scale that we're talking about. But in terms of being a best-in-class digital insurer, Helene, can I ask you, what do you think going forward will be, if I can use that same analogy again, the key ingredients to becoming a best-in-class digital insurer?
So, well, many things. Clearly, it starts with the data rather than a document. We've got to move away from documents, we really do. But I go back to that point about its added service. You know, we as an industry should be telling the client stuff about their risk that they don't themselves know. We need to be giving that prevention advice. Nobody wants a claim at all. We need to move into a situation where we can predict it, prevent it, and then everybody can then run their businesses smoothly. So it's about that combination of data and service, really.
Exciting. And Tim, would you consider that obviously now that people are becoming more digitally savvy, and customers certainly, we're starting to see people move between insurers far more with far more agility. How can you maintain that customer stickiness when customers are more savvy?
Yeah, I think insurance, I mean, I was fortunate. I worked in other industries prior to my time in insurance, and I worked in the utility industry, for example. And there are some similarities between elements of insurance and utility, which is that parts of the insurance in the minds of, say, a consumer is actually a commodity service in the same way that you might think about electricity or water. And the challenge with any industry that has that commoditization in the eyes of the customer is, how do I create stickiness, right? Because a commodity product means that switching propensity is going to be very high. We've seen in the UK over the years that price sensitivity at the consumer end is a driver of behavior. But I think it is very, and what Nigel and Helene are saying resonates very strongly with me. It is about the way in which the experience and the service is delivered to those customers, so that there is a very much a higher propensity for loyalty. And I don't know how many insurers I was trying to find out the data last week, but just simple things about getting the basics right, offering multi-channels to interact, not just mobile, and then understanding your customer sentiment through classic things like Net Promoter Score, all this kind of basic stuff about understanding your customers and how they resonate and how they respond to you, I think is so important, because it doesn't take much to switch a customer on. And then Helene says no one wants a claim, but they do happen. And when you service that claim in an amazing way, you're going to create loyalty for a long time. I've had the same experience happen to myself with Aviva, for example. And when I think about my motor insurance, Aviva pops up to the top of my head because they handled my claim brilliantly just a year ago. So I think there's some real simple stuff that, again, I don't think the industry necessarily fully gets, because a lot of senior leaders are maybe more engineering or technical mindset in terms of underwriting, but it is about the customer experience that we should be focused on. And I think the big opportunity for the industry, which again, going back to this big tech wind of change that's coming through, is the personalization. If you can find ways to create that little moment, that service, that offer that lights up someone because it's something they don't know, or it's an extra little gift, that will generate huge amounts of loyalty and stickiness to you. And I think, and as Helene was saying, that's a trend that's got to be followed, because loyalty drives better margins in the long term. So it makes great sense for the company, for shareholders. So everyone's a happy bunny in that environment.
My counsel though on that, and whilst I agree with you, loyalty to me is the icing on the cake. The regulator now recently has come out, obviously, with this whole piece on dual pricing or price walking, to make sure that we don't penalise people for being loyal, and specifically those that are unable or unwilling to look around. So we have, at least in the retail space, become commoditized, and as a net result, it's a race to zero on price, which I think goes back to Helene's point about when is insurance not insurance. In the old days, it was there, after the event. Today, you could argue it's there at the event, and where Helene's taking the business is very much, how do we get there to you well before the event? And that for me is going to be critical about changing these things.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting to kind of, this technology, unlike what we're seeing in maybe fintech, where it's the kind of continuation of financial services, insurance seems to be looking at moving into something completely different. So Helene, could I actually get your kind of crystal ball, ideas on this in terms of where do you see the future of the insurance industry? You've mentioned obviously it's going to become more prevention, but like maybe in the short term especially, what do you think insurance is going to become?
I think it will become much more ecosystem based. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's how connected we are and how dependent on each other we actually are. So it's about how do you bring together multiple people, multiple solutions to solve one or more problems and create those network effects. Because whilst you've got price comparisons and you want to shop around and everything else, actually there's an element of you want to perhaps go to one place with your holistic view of risk, and then you can say, okay, I want my property here, my cargo here, and I want to buy this sensor device, and I want to buy, this satellite imagery of where I am, and this data around what's around me in terms of, theft and all the rest of it. You start getting a holistic view. So for me, it's around ecosystems and the people that can bring those things together and make meaningful sense of all of the different styles of data is going to win. And I saw something fabulous last week called No Risk. So one of the folks in the Lloyd's lab, they're starting to nail that in one segment, and it's about risk management. So they've taken 6 different businesses which are standing up in their own right, but they're bringing them together with one view of risk. And that is so powerful when it sits aside product, because client then gives complete transparency of them as the risk, the holistic picture, and then the insurer can say, okay, well, this is a really well managed risk, I can see the full transparency, and then can make product and premium decisions accordingly.
Tim, could I also, following on from Helen there, could I get your input in terms of the future of the insurance industry? Do you see it going along similar lines of that ecosystem?
Yes, I do. And I think, many of the companies across the world that we're working with, actually, I can't say the name. It will be in a press release next week. there's a bank in South Africa that we're working with that is, building on this trend, built a pet ecosystem, which is very much around, it's not just about the insurance products, it's a whole range of services around owning a pet. And I think that immersion, that putting your arms around the customer's world and contextualization, understanding, as Nigel was saying earlier, what is it, the assets that's at risk that people care about, and how do you help them navigate and ensure that they're not suffering ultimately the loss? Because no one, as Helen says, no one wants a loss. So I think the ecosystem is definitely one drive. I think the contextualization of risk, I think, will lead us and lead the industry into needing to have, again, as we spoke about it earlier, better and enhanced capabilities. So for example, underwriting today still got some modernization to go through, but real-time risk pricing will ultimately be where we'll get more towards, because that's the only way that you can start to offer contextual meaning, and given the data that we've got at our disposal, that's not, again, an impossible task in the near term. So that's something that will actually happen. And I think that what we'll also see, if you look at life and health for a minute, I know we'd probably focus a little bit on P&C, but in life and health, by 2030, I think I was reading, those people over 60 will increase by 50%. So they'll go up from 900 million globally to 1.4 billion. That will mean that there's a whole raft of needs, increasing needs for life and health. And if anything, COVID is making people very, very aware of the risk of their own mortality to their loved ones and themselves. So you can see some big meta level trends of increasing demand for life and health products. And then you go into the world of wearables and IoT, and how you can then start to real-time risk pricing around people's health. And of course, that then takes you into a big world of prevention and advice around how to live your life better. So we've got a number of our clients that are going down that track as well, which is very exciting.
Wow. I mean, it sounds absolutely almost scary hearing this kind of convergence of technology and culture as people become and customer demand. I mean, with that in mind, Nigel, I've got to ask: have you seen, especially on your travels, a particular sector of the world that seems to be embracing these new changes better than others, and that are actually already actioning some of these very exciting new methods that we're hearing about?
I'm not sure they're embracing it any faster, but if you look to Asia, for example, you could argue, or even India as well, where people were never insured or you didn't have the same level of developed product that you see here in the Western world right now. You could argue quite quickly that actually they've leapfrogged all the legacy that we've got today and gone straight to more modern products. Straight to more modern products, straight to things like micro insurance that we've seen with the likes of Bima and others. So they haven't, it's not that they're adopting faster, but they're just not falling into the same path. They've learned from what we've done, they've seen what's worked, what's not worked, and then develop products that are more fit for a modern age. So the whole idea of a micro insurance product that allows you to plant a seed straight away, and should there be no rain or whatever else, automatically provide a claim through a parametric trigger or whatever else, we're seeing elsewhere, but we're starting with zero user base, therefore it's easier to adopt. So I think that sort of stuff is actually really, really exciting. And that will then come back into Europe and elsewhere, where we think we can actually then migrate people away from more traditional products and mindsets into things that have worked elsewhere.
Absolutely exciting. Guys, thank you so much. I think that's all we've had time for. I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves.
I think you've got the happy clappy crew on the call, haven't you? I think
You know what,
it's been so bullish and positive about the future, which is great. I mean, we need these perspectives because the industry plays an essential role for global commerce, for people's peace of mind. So it's good that we can talk about it in such a positive way.
Yeah, it's been really refreshing to hear this kind of futuristic approach, actually seeing what the cards have been dealt and just actioning on it in the best way possible. So thank you all for joining me here today. And to all our viewers, you can of course catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com and of course our YouTube and LinkedIn. So I hope to see you there. And to all our guests, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.